I never thought I'd hear those words from my own daughter. "Mommy, Daddy has a lover, and they're going to take all your money." Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, it was all a lie. I had to find out the truth. What I discovered shattered everything. Stay tuned, because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about trust, family, and betrayal. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. This story isn't just mine. It could be yours too. I couldn't breathe. I held the phone in my hand, my heart hammering in my chest. Was it true? Could it really be? My daughter Sophie had never said anything like this before. She was only 6, for God's sake. Children don't make up things like this. "Mommy," she had whispered again, her little voice trembling. "Mommy, Daddy has a lover and they're going to take all your money." My mind raced, thoughts spinning in 1,000 directions. I looked at Sophie, her innocent eyes wide with concern, her tiny hands clutching the hem of her dress. She was afraid. I could see that. But was it real? Could she have overheard something? Or had she imagined it? I forced myself to speak. "Sophie, where did you hear that? Tell me." She shrugged, her little shoulders rising and falling as she chewed on her bottom lip. "I saw them, Daddy and the lady at the park. They were talking, and she smiled at him like she was special." My breath caught. The park. The last time I had been there with Jason, it was a family outing, just the 3 of us, playing with Sophie in the grass, laughing under the afternoon sun. But that was weeks ago. Jason had been working late. Coming home late, always too tired to spend time with me. He'd barely touched me in months, even less so with Sophie. No, I had to be imagining this, I told myself. But Sophie's words kept echoing in my mind. "Mommy, they're going to take all your money." I stood frozen, unable to move, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. Was this why Jason had been acting so strange? The late nights, the unexplained trips. I felt something cold settle deep in my stomach, a feeling I hadn't had in years. How long had he been seeing her? The questions were like a flood, drowning me, and yet I couldn't find the courage to voice them. The fear of the truth was too much. But my daughter's innocent revelation, her trembling voice, demanded answers. I looked at Sophie again, her tiny hands still clutching her dress. She had no idea what she had just opened up. She was too young to understand the weight of her words. "Do you think Daddy loves her?" I whispered, unable to stop myself. Sophie shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. "No, Mommy, Daddy loves you, but she's mean." Her words made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Mean? Was she talking about Veronica? The name danced in my head, but I pushed it away. No. This couldn't be happening. I had to know the truth. I had to confront him. But first, I had to find out if this was a lie or if it was the beginning of the end. Sophie's words echoed in my ears, and with them, a deep, hollow feeling that I couldn't shake. "Mommy," Sophie's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you mad?" I shook my head, forcing a smile. "No, sweetheart, I'm just thinking." "Don't be mad at Daddy," she whispered, as if reading my mind. "He loves you." I hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of her small body against mine. My daughter, my sweet, innocent girl. She had no idea what was at stake, but I did. The weight of it pressed down on me, but I couldn't show her that, not now. I pulled back, looked at her, and kissed her forehead. "I won't be mad, sweetheart. I promise." But deep inside, I was already furious. Furious at Jason for whatever he was hiding, furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. How could I have been so blind? I needed to know more. I had to confront him, but not yet. I wasn't ready. First, I had to dig deeper. I had to gather the evidence. I needed to know the full truth before I made a move. Taking a deep breath, I looked at the clock. It was almost time for Jason to come home. I couldn't let him know I was on to him, at least not yet. I needed time. Time to plan. But for now, I had Sophie, and that was all that mattered. I kissed her one last time on the forehead before she ran off to play with her toys. She was too young to understand the storm brewing, but I wasn't, and I would do anything to protect her from the fallout that was coming. I walked to the window, staring out at the city lights, my mind already racing with plans. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to let Jason or anyone else destroy what I had built. This wasn't just about money. This was about my life, my family, my future, and I was going to fight for it. A perfect life, or so it seemed. For years, everything had felt like a dream, a beautiful house, a loving husband, and the perfect little girl. We weren't rich by any means, but we had enough. I'd always thought Jason and I had something special, a connection deeper than most couples. We'd built this life together, brick by brick. I worked hard, and Jason worked just as hard, providing for us in ways I could never have imagined when we first met. We'd met in college, both struggling to make ends meet. I was a waitress at a local diner, studying business on the side, while he was the golden boy on the football team, chasing a dream bigger than anything I could ever have imagined. But we clicked. There was something about his ambition, the way he looked at life like nothing was out of his reach. I admired that. I remember our first date like it was yesterday, how he took me to that tiny Italian restaurant on the corner of Main Street. The candles flickered, the wine flowed, and he talked about all the things he wanted to do in life. He didn't have much back then, but I saw it in his eyes, a fire that I wanted to be part of. And somehow we managed to make it work. We married young, started our family, and then life seemed like it was finally settling into place. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but over the last year, the cracks began to show. Jason's late nights at work started stretching into weekends, and business trips became more frequent, more urgent. At first, I just chalked it up to the stress of his job. He had a demanding career in finance, and I knew it was his dream to make it to the top. I was proud of him, I still am, but I couldn't help but feel like I was losing him in the process. Our intimate moments became fewer and farther between. Conversation started to feel mechanical. He came home late, exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open before falling asleep on the couch. And I let it happen. I told myself it was just a phase, that I needed to be patient, that everything would get back to normal. But then Sophie spoke those words. Now, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had always trusted Jason, believed in his integrity. We were partners, after all, but I had never felt so alone in our marriage as I did now. The more I thought about it, the more everything began to make sense in a way I hadn't allowed myself to see. Jason's late nights were never explained, the way he'd shut down when I asked about them, the way he'd keep his phone face down on the kitchen counter when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Could it be possible? Could he have been hiding something this whole time? I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window. Our neighborhood had always been peaceful. Quiet streets, well-kept lawns, kids playing in the yards. I'd been proud of where we lived, proud of the life we'd created. But as I stood there, looking out at the streets that had once felt so comforting, I started to feel the walls closing in around me. What if this perfect life was just an illusion? I needed to know. I needed to see the truth for myself, and I wasn't going to let Jason or anyone else hide behind their lies anymore. The first step would be to follow him. I needed proof, something concrete that I could hold on to when the inevitable confrontation came. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was done waiting in the dark. I needed answers. I thought back to the last few weeks, the subtle changes in his behavior that I had been too afraid to question. The times he'd been distant, his distracted smiles, the lingering moments when he wouldn't look me in the eyes. Had it always been there, hidden in plain sight? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to imagine my life falling apart because of a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. But if I wanted to know the truth, I had to see it for myself. There was no other way. The plan was simple: follow Jason, observe his every move, and see if Sophie's words held any truth. I had no idea how long this would take, but I was prepared for it. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, not without understanding why he'd let it go this far. As I sat there, contemplating the steps I'd have to take, I realized just how much I'd been blind to. The life we'd built, the marriage I thought I knew, it all suddenly seemed like a fragile house of cards, one small gust of wind away from collapsing, but there was something inside me that refused to let that happen. I had worked too hard to let my life slip away unnoticed. I was stronger than that, and I was going to find out everything. The next morning, the moment Jason kissed me goodbye, I felt a strange chill run through my veins. He was leaving for another important meeting, his briefcase in hand, his tired smile barely masking his exhaustion. As he walked out the door, I gave him a small wave, but my mind was already 1,000 miles away, planning my next steps. Follow him, watch him, see the truth for yourself. The words echoed in my mind as I busied myself with household chores, pretending everything was normal. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I wasn't the woman I used to be anymore, the one who blindly trusted her husband. I was now a woman with a mission, a woman ready to uncover the reality of the life I thought I knew. I spent the next few hours pacing around the house, waiting for the right moment. I had to be careful. Jason couldn't know I was onto him. I needed to observe without raising suspicion. The key was patience. Finally, just after lunch, I grabbed my jacket and keys. I knew where he usually went when he wasn't working, his usual hangouts, the places he'd visit when he said he was running errands or meeting clients. Today, I would follow him. I would go to those places and see if there was any truth to what Sophie had told me. I slipped into my car, trying to control the flutter of anxiety in my chest. I told myself to breathe. It was just a simple observation, nothing more. But my heart raced as I drove through the streets, my eyes never leaving the rearview mirror, waiting for the familiar sight of Jason's car to appear. I knew the routes he usually took, the shortcuts to his office, the cafe near his work, the gym he frequented. I passed each landmark, holding my breath, hoping I wouldn't miss him. The minutes seemed to stretch endlessly as I drove aimlessly, trying to stay hidden. I didn't want him to spot me. I had to keep a low profile. Then, just as I passed the corner of Elm Street, I saw it. His car, parked outside a small, upscale restaurant I hadn't seen him visit in months. It was one of those fancy spots he had taken me to a couple of times when we were first dating, before life got complicated. I parked a block away, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. What was he doing here? I waited in the car, my eyes trained on the restaurant's entrance. After a few minutes, Jason appeared, but he wasn't alone. My heart stopped. There she was, Veronica. She stepped out from behind the corner, her heels clicking on the pavement as she joined him at the door. He smiled at her, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. It wasn't the forced, tired smile he'd been giving me lately. No, this one was different. It was warm, genuine, as if he hadn't a care in the world. My stomach twisted. I felt a surge of nausea, but I couldn't look away. They laughed together, exchanged a few words, and entered the restaurant side by side. So it was true. I had seen it with my own eyes. My stomach churned with a mix of anger, disbelief, and betrayal. They weren't just acquaintances or business partners. They were close. Too close. Their body language, their shared laughter. It was intimate. Far too intimate for just a casual meeting. I couldn't stay in the car any longer. I had to do something. But what? I waited for them to enter the restaurant, my mind racing, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Not here, not like this, but I had to get closer. I needed to know more, see how they interacted, find out what they were really doing behind closed doors. I stepped out of the car, trying to steady my hands as I locked it behind me. The cold air bit at my skin, but I hardly noticed. My focus was entirely on the restaurant. I couldn't just sit back anymore and let the unknown consume me. I had to know. I had to know everything. I walked towards the restaurant, trying to keep my distance, but close enough to catch sight of the two of them. My heart pounded in my chest. Every footstep seemed to echo in the silent street, making me acutely aware of how exposed I felt. If Jason saw me, it would all be over. But I had come this far. There was no turning back now. I lingered near the entrance, pretending to look at the menu posted outside. I saw them through the glass, seated at a table in the corner. Veronica leaned in slightly, her hand resting on the table. Jason was looking at her like he was hanging on every word she said. The sight made my blood boil. Every laugh they shared, every shared glance, felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I stayed there for a few more minutes, my mind reeling, my emotions swirling. I couldn't just stand here forever. I had to get back to the house to figure out what my next move was. But I wasn't leaving without one final look. Just as I turned to walk away, I caught a glimpse of Jason reaching for his phone. He checked the screen, his face flickering with something unreadable before he put it down again. My heart skipped a beat. What was that about? But before I could make sense of it, he looked up at the window, his eyes scanning the street. Did he see me? I froze, holding my breath. He stared for a long moment. His eyes narrowed, almost as if he could sense someone was watching. I quickly ducked out of sight, pressing my back against the wall, praying he hadn't seen me. Seconds passed like hours. I dared to peek again, but he was back to talking with Veronica, laughing at something she'd said. I exhaled sharply, my heart still racing, but I knew this wasn't the time to get careless. I needed to go. I needed to process everything, and most importantly, I needed a plan. The drive home felt like a blur. My mind was racing, filled with images of Jason and Veronica together, their smiles, their laughter, the warmth between them. I could still hear Sophie's voice in my head. "Mommy, Daddy has a lover." The words echoed over and over again, each time feeling more like a painful truth than a child's innocent fantasy. When I got home, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house. I wasn't ready to face it, not yet, not ready to confront the man I thought I knew. Jason, my husband, the father of our child. How could this happen? How could he betray me like this? But I couldn't sit here forever, trapped by my own thoughts. I had to do something. I had to move forward, because one thing was clear. I wasn't going to be passive anymore. The truth was out there, and I was going to uncover it, no matter what. I entered the house quietly, making sure I didn't disturb Sophie, who was napping in her room. I needed a moment to think, to process everything. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge, taking a bottle of water. My hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if it was from fear, anger, or both. Jason's phone had buzzed in the car on the way home, but I hadn't looked at it. I didn't know if I should. Part of me wanted to. Maybe it had something I could use. A message, an email, something incriminating. But the other part of me knew that I couldn't let myself become obsessed with tracking his every move. I wasn't some detective or spy. I was his wife, and I had to take control, not just of the situation, but of myself. The next few days passed in a haze. Jason came and went as usual, but there was a palpable distance between us now. I couldn't look at him the same way. I couldn't shake the image of him with Veronica, sharing that moment in the restaurant. It was as if everything about him was suddenly foreign, unfamiliar, and every time I caught a glimpse of him, I wondered, what did you say to her? What did you do when I wasn't around? But despite the tension, I kept things normal. Sophie never noticed anything different. She was still young, too young to understand what was going on. And as much as I wished I could shield her from the ugly truth, I knew I couldn't. I had to protect her. I had to protect myself. It was on the fourth day after I followed Jason to the restaurant that I finally got the courage to dig deeper. My first move was to find out who Veronica really was. Who was this woman who had taken my place, who had wormed her way into my husband's life? I started with the basics, his phone. It wasn't a big leap. He'd left it lying around on the kitchen counter, screen up. I knew he wasn't going to be home for the next couple of hours, so I had time. I grabbed the phone, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but I knew I had to look. I hesitated for a moment, then unlocked the phone with the code he'd always used, a simple number I'd learned over the years. It only took a few seconds of scrolling to find it, an entire thread of texts with Veronica. They were casual at first, polite exchanges about work, but then there were the others. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again tonight. I thought about you all day. You looked so good in that dress. My stomach turned. I had to keep reading. There were more texts, but I couldn't bear to read them all. How long had this been going on? How long had Jason been seeing her behind my back? But then I found something more damning. An image attached to a message from Veronica. She was smiling, holding a glass of wine. But it wasn't the smile that made my blood run cold. It was the caption below it. We're ready for the next step. I'm going to take everything, all of it. I felt my chest tighten. My head swam, as the words blurred before my eyes. What did she mean by take everything? Was she talking about money? Or was there something more to this? My hands began to tremble as I scrolled back through the messages. This was bigger than I'd realized. This wasn't just an affair. This was a plan, a scheme. Take everything. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't breathe. I had to put the phone down, but the words kept echoing in my mind. Take everything. My marriage, my family, my future. I slammed the phone down on the table, my mind racing. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I couldn't sit back and allow her to take everything from me. I had worked too hard to build this life, to lose it to a woman I didn't even know. But I couldn't just confront Jason with this. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to know exactly what Veronica was planning. I had to dig deeper. I couldn't just rely on Jason's phone. I needed to find out more about this woman and her connection to my husband. I needed to gather information, everything I could, so that when I confronted him, I would have the power. That night, after Jason had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, still shaken by what I'd seen. I was no longer just a wife trying to save her marriage. I was a woman on a mission, and nothing was going to stop me from finding out the truth. I opened my laptop and began searching. I dug into Veronica's social media presence, looking for any clues that might give me insight into her life, her plans. But it wasn't until I found a post, a seemingly innocuous post from her about a vacation to a secluded resort, that I realized something even darker. The location she had tagged was a place Jason had mentioned before, a place he had said he wanted to visit, but never had the time. A place that seemed perfect for a secret rendezvous. I didn't need any more confirmation. I had all I needed. Tomorrow, I would confront him, and when I did, I would have the truth on my side. The sun hadn't even fully risen when I heard the sound of Jason's footsteps in the hallway. It was early, much earlier than usual, but I was already wide awake. I had barely slept the night before, consumed by the fire of what I had learned. The evidence I'd uncovered. It all felt like a cold slap, a betrayal I couldn't just let go. As I lay in bed, I listened to the familiar rhythm of his movements. Jason was getting ready for work, his routine as predictable as ever. But today it felt different. Every sound he made, every moment of his day, felt like it was happening in a world I was no longer part of. It was as if I had stepped outside of my own life, looking in from a distance, a spectator to a reality I no longer recognized. I could hear the rustling of papers, the clinking of his coffee cup, the sound of him grabbing his jacket to head out the door. For a second, I wondered if I should say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. How could I ask him? After everything, how could I confront him with the truth when he still had the power to lie? No, I wasn't going to let him lie again. Not this time. I waited until the front door shut behind him. Then I got up and made my way to the kitchen. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through the messages I had found the night before. I felt a wave of nausea, but I had to keep going. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. I had to confront him. I sat at the kitchen table, tapping my fingers against the surface, my mind racing with everything I wanted to say. But the truth was, I didn't even know where to start. How do you confront the man you loved, the man who was supposed to be your partner, your best friend, about something so ugly, so personal? How do you ask the questions you've been afraid to ask for months? Are you having an affair with her? The question felt hollow, too simple, and yet too terrifying to say out loud. The images of Veronica and Jason together flashed in my mind, their smiles, their private jokes, their shared moments that I had never been privy to. How long had it been going on? How many nights had he spent with her while I sat alone, waiting for him to come home? I took a deep breath, my mind still swirling. The decision had been made, but the fear, the uncertainty, still lingered. I knew I needed more than just words. This had to be decisive. This wasn't just about confronting Jason. This was about taking control of my life again, about protecting Sophie and myself from whatever plans they had for our future. I had to act fast, before Jason returned home. I couldn't wait any longer to uncover the truth. I made the phone call. Hello? Jason's voice sounded distant on the other end of the line. Where are you? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. I'm in the car, heading to the office. Why? I need you to come home. Now. My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it, but I couldn't hide my emotions anymore. Not with everything I had learned. Sarah, what's going on? I'm busy. Can't this wait? No, Jason, it can't. I need you here, right now. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him weighing his options, whether to argue or to listen. Finally, he sighed. Fine, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I hung up, sitting back in the chair, letting the silence swallow me whole. My heart raced, my stomach twisted with dread. I had no idea how this would go, but there was no turning back now. When Jason finally walked through the door, his expression was exactly what I expected, confused, slightly annoyed, and clearly wondering what this was all about. He dropped his briefcase by the door and glanced at me. What's this about? Why the urgency? He asked, his voice laced with impatience. I stood up from the table, my hands trembling as I tried to steady myself. Sit down, Jason. He raised an eyebrow but did as I asked, lowering himself into the chair across from me. I could see the unease in his eyes, but I wasn't sure if he knew what was coming, or if he was still holding on to the belief that I didn't know the truth. I know about Veronica, I said, my voice cold, flat. Jason's face froze. For a moment, he said nothing, his eyes darting from mine to the floor, as if he were searching for something, some excuse, some way out. But there was no way out. I know about the money, the texts, everything, I continued. I know that you've been seeing her behind my back, and I know you've been planning something. So, what is it, Jason? What the hell is going on? His face flushed a deep shade of red, and for the first time in months, I saw guilt flash across his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Then he tried again, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Stop, I cut him off, the anger rising inside me. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want the truth, now. He let out a long breath, rubbing his forehead as if he were trying to gather his thoughts. It's complicated, he muttered, as if that was supposed to make it better. No, I snapped, standing up. It's not complicated. You've been lying to me. For how long, Jason? How long has this been going on? And don't lie to me now. Jason stared at me, his lips trembling as if he were trying to find the right words. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting between mine. And finally, he spoke the words I had been dreading. It's been going on for 6 months, Sarah. I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me, I interrupted, my voice rising. You didn't know how to tell me that you've been sleeping with another woman, that you've been planning to leave me. Jason stood up suddenly, his face pale. I'm sorry, okay? I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could handle it, but you didn't handle it. You destroyed everything. You lied to me, and now... My voice faltered, but I quickly regained control. And now you're trying to take everything, aren't you? This was never just about you and Veronica, was it? He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing, as if he didn't know what to say. You thought you could walk away with her, with the money, without facing any consequences. But you're wrong, Jason. This is my life too, and I'm done letting you destroy it. I stood tall, no longer the timid woman I had been just days ago. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my future. And I wasn't going to let him take that from me. Not without a fight. Jason stood there, his face pale, the weight of my words sinking in. But still, he didn't move. He didn't say anything for a long time, his eyes avoiding mine, as if he couldn't bear to face the reality of what he had done. I crossed my arms, waiting. I wasn't going to give him the luxury of silence anymore. I wasn't going to sit here and let him lie to me, or try to justify his actions. I'd heard enough excuses. Finally, he spoke, his voice weak and defensive. Sarah, I'm sorry. Okay? I never meant for any of this to happen. He paused, swallowing hard. Veronica, she's complicated. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Complicated? That was his excuse. Complicated didn't explain betrayal. It didn't explain the lies. It didn't explain the woman he had been seeing behind my back for months. I don't need your apologies, Jason, I said, my voice sharp. I need answers. What was she to you? Why her? What does she want? Jason looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt and shame. She's not just some woman, Sarah. I didn't know how to end it. I didn't know how to tell you because... I don't know, I felt like she could give me something I was missing. What was she giving you, Jason? I took a step forward, my voice rising with every word. Money, attention, affection. What did she have that I couldn't give you? He didn't answer immediately, but when he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. She promised me things. She said I could have more than this life, more than the family we have. His words stung, and I had to take a step back, trying to keep myself steady. More, I repeated, disbelief washing over me. Is that what you wanted? More. You have a wife, you have a daughter. This was your life, Jason. I thought I could have it all, he said, his voice faltering. I thought I could have both, but I got greedy, and now I've ruined everything. I couldn't contain my anger anymore. I felt the rage boil up inside me, and this time I didn't hold back. You've ruined everything. No, Jason, you didn't just ruin this family. You've been planning to take everything. You've been planning to walk away with her and leave us in the dust, haven't you? His face twisted in guilt. I didn't plan on it, he protested weakly, but I could see the cracks in his facade. I could see the truth breaking through. There it was, the truth I had been avoiding. Then what the hell is Veronica to you, Jason? I asked again, my voice cold and cutting. What does she want from you? And what were you planning on doing with my money? Jason took a deep breath, as though steeling himself for the confession he didn't want to make. He looked at me for a moment, his eyes hollow. Then, with an almost defeated expression, he spoke. She wants to take everything, all of it. She promised me that I could have more money, more freedom, more of the life I thought I deserved. She said she could help me build an empire. I thought I could just have it all. I wanted out, Sarah. I was going to take everything from you and Sophie and start fresh with her. He paused, his voice shaking with guilt. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every word from his mouth felt like a betrayal, a crushing weight that I couldn't escape. He had been planning this. He had been ready to leave me and Sophie behind for a woman who promised him wealth and a better life at the cost of his family. I was frozen for a moment, struggling to process the enormity of his confession. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about an affair. It was about a future he had been planning, a future without me. My mind raced as I fought to keep my emotions in check. Jason had crossed a line. He had betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. But what hurt even more was the realization that he wasn't the man I thought he was. The man who had promised me forever. The man who had built a life with me. "No," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You didn't just make a mistake, Jason. You chose her. You chose to betray me, to betray us, for the promise of something you thought would make you happy. You thought Veronica could give you more, but all she's given you is a broken marriage and a ruined life." Jason looked at me, his eyes wide with regret, but it was too late. The damage was done. "I don't know what to say, Sarah. I didn't think it would get this far. I thought I could fix it. I thought you'd understand." "I understand now," I said coldly. "I understand everything. And you know what? You're right. You didn't think it would get this far. You didn't think I would ever find out." Jason stood there, paralyzed, as if he was trying to find the right words, but nothing came. I had finally said what I needed to say. The truth was out. The man I thought I knew was gone. I turned away, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I needed to breathe. I needed space. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But as I walked toward the door, I heard Jason's voice, weak and almost pleading. "Sarah, please, don't leave. We can work this out. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The silence in the room was suffocating. The truth had been laid bare, and Jason's words still echoed in my mind. I had spent years believing in him, in us, and now I could barely recognize the man standing in front of me. The weight of his betrayal hung in the air like a thick fog, and I was drowning in it. Jason had been planning to leave me. He had been making choices, decisions, that were destroying everything we'd worked for, and he had done it all behind my back. My trust in him had been shattered. And with it, everything I thought I knew about our marriage. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. Stay in control, I told myself. If I lost my composure now, I'd lose everything, and I couldn't afford to do that, not when there was still so much to fight for. Jason took a step toward me, his eyes filled with desperation. "Sarah, I know I've hurt you. I know I've betrayed you in ways I can't even begin to explain. But please, don't walk away from this. We can fix this. We can make it work, I swear." I shook my head slowly, the sting of his words cutting deeper with every second. "Fix it?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "How do you propose we fix this, Jason? You've been planning to leave me for months. You've been planning to take everything I built with you, and give it to her. How do you think we can fix this?" He opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He seemed lost for a moment, his eyes flickering with regret and confusion. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was lost. Veronica, she made me feel important, made me feel like I was worth more than just this life we've built." I felt the anger rise again. Worth more? Was that what it came down to? His ego, his desire for more, for wealth, for something shiny and new. "And what was I, Jason?" I asked, my voice shaking with the emotion I was struggling to control. "What was I to you? A placeholder, a woman who couldn't give you more? You've been looking for something else your whole life, and now you're willing to tear apart your family for it." He took a step closer, but I held up my hand to stop him. I couldn't stand any more of his apologies. "Don't come near me," I warned. "This isn't about me. This isn't about fixing us. You didn't want to fix this. You wanted more. And now that you've taken that step, you've left me with nothing." Jason stood there, frozen. He could say nothing more. He knew it, I knew it, and deep down, He knew there was no coming back from this. I turned away from him, not trusting myself to speak any further. But as I walked toward the door, Jason's voice stopped me. "Sarah, wait." His voice cracked, but there was something else in it, a desperation, a plea. "What do you want me to do? What do you want from me?" I turned back, locking eyes with him for the first time since the confession. I saw him, really saw him then. A man broken by his own decisions, by his own actions. But it was too late for me to care about his pain. I had my own now. "What I want," I said slowly, my voice thick with conviction, "is for you to leave, to walk out of this house and never come back. You've made your choices. You've made your bed with her, and now you'll sleep in it." Jason's face contorted with disbelief. "You want me to leave?" He took a step toward me. "Just like that?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, just like that. I can't fix this. I can't be with a man who's willing to tear everything down for someone else. Not anymore." The door slammed behind him with a force that shook the entire house. I stood in the middle of the living room, my chest heaving with the weight of the decision I had just made. Jason was gone. He was out of my life for good. And as much as I had wanted this, as much as I knew it was the right thing to do, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a loss. I was left standing in the ruins of everything we had built. A house full of memories, memories that were now tainted by lies and betrayal. I walked to the window, staring out at the street where Jason's car had just pulled away. It was over, for good. There would be no more pretending, no more wondering if he was coming home, no more hoping that somehow we could fix this. It was time to move on. The house felt eerily quiet now. Jason's things, his shoes by the door, his briefcase still in the entryway, were all remnants of a life that no longer existed. It was a strange feeling, knowing he wasn't coming back. It was as if I had lost part of myself along with him. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing in the empty spaces. I hadn't realized how much of me had been tethered to him until now. Every room held a memory. Every object felt like a weight around my neck. The kitchen, where we used to cook together late at night. The living room, where we'd sit on the couch after a long day, talking about nothing and everything at once. Now it all felt so foreign. I thought I would feel relief, but all I felt was a hollow ache. I had done what I needed to do, taken control. I had confronted Jason, and I had forced him to face the truth. But that truth was one I couldn't escape. My thoughts drifted to Veronica. Her name was like a bitter taste in my mouth. Jason's betrayal had cut me deep, but it wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that Veronica wasn't just some woman. She was a part of a plan that involved taking everything I had built. I had to know more about her. I couldn't just sit back and let her win. She thought she could take everything from me, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I spent the next few hours researching Veronica. I looked through every social media platform I could find, every mention of her name in Jason's messages. It didn't take long for me to uncover more details about her family, her background, her connections. It was clear that Veronica wasn't just some random woman from Jason's life. She was someone who had carefully crafted a life around him, a life where I didn't belong. As I dug deeper, I came across a photograph. It was an older one from a few years ago, but there was something about it that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of Veronica with a man, someone I recognized immediately. It was her husband, the one she had told Jason she was trying to escape from, the one she had convinced Jason to help her leave. But in that photo, they were smiling together. They were a family, two people who had once been in love, who had built a life together. So Veronica's escape wasn't as simple as she made it seem. She had been playing Jason, manipulating him from the start. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Jason had never been her savior. He had been a pawn in her game, a man she had lured in with promises of something more, something better, and in the process, she had made him believe that he could have it all. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had been used, just like I had been. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was what I was going to do next. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. It was time to confront Veronica. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't prepared for the calm, almost casual way she responded when I texted her. I had been sitting at the kitchen table for hours, my nerves getting the best of me, but when I finally pressed send, I was hit with a strange sense of clarity. I know what you've been doing with Jason. I know you've been planning to take everything, and I'm done letting you think you can get away with it. We need to talk. The reply came quickly, almost as if she had been waiting for it. Sarah, I didn't mean to hurt you. This was never about you. Jason and I... She didn't finish. I read her message again, my heart pounding. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was a dismissal. She didn't feel guilty. She didn't even feel the need to explain herself to me. She was still playing the game. I felt the blood rush to my face as I typed my response. You've been playing Jason from the start. You've been lying to him, just like you lied to me. And I won't let you take what's mine. I want to meet you, face to face, now. A long pause followed, but then finally her response came. Fine, you want to talk? Let's talk. I felt my heart race as I stared at the screen. I had no idea what this would turn into, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, about taking back everything Veronica thought she could steal. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I stood up from the table, a sense of purpose filling me. This wasn't going to be easy, but I had come too far to back down now. As I grabbed my coat and keys, I paused for a moment, thinking of Sophie. She was safe for now. She had no idea what was happening, but I wasn't going to let this affect her. Not now, not ever. I would protect her with everything I had, and that meant standing up to Veronica, no matter what it took. I drove to the cafe where we had arranged to meet. It wasn't far from the house, just a small, quiet spot on the edge of town. When I arrived, I parked my car and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. What was I expecting? What would she say when she saw me? I didn't know. But what I did know was that this was it, the final confrontation. I walked into the cafe, my heels clicking on the tile floor. I spotted her right away. Veronica was sitting at a table near the window, her back straight, a smug expression on her face. She had no idea what was about to hit her. I approached the table, my heart pounding in my chest. She didn't even look up as I stood there, her eyes focused on her phone. You must be Sarah, she said, her voice cool, almost detached. I didn't sit down. We need to talk, I said, my voice firm. This is where it ends. You've been playing Jason for months, and I'm done letting you tear my life apart. Veronica finally looked up, a slight smirk on her lips. Tear your life apart? She laughed softly. Sweetheart, I'm not the one who ruined your life. That was your husband. I took a deep breath, my anger rising, but I held my ground. You're right. He's the one who betrayed me. But you've been the one pulling the strings, and that's not something I'm going to let slide. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze narrowing. So, what are you going to do about it? I met her gaze, unwavering. I'm going to take everything back. I'm going to make sure you don't get away with this. And I'm going to make sure Jason knows the truth about you. Veronica's eyes glimmered with amusement, as if my words didn't faze her at all. She sat back in her chair, swirling her coffee slowly, clearly savoring the control she thought she had over the situation. But there was something different in the air now. Something had shifted. The quiet confidence I once had, the patience I had worn like a shield, was gone. You think you can scare me? Veronica's voice was smooth, condescending. You're just angry, and I get it. But you don't get to come here, acting like you can change anything. Jason and I have a deal, Sarah. A deal you can't break. Not now, not ever. I leaned in, my palms pressing flat against the table. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. The anger, the grief, it had all turned into something else. Something darker, I wasn't just protecting my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my future, for my dignity, for the right to not be destroyed by this woman and the lies she had weaved. I don't care what kind of deal you think you have with him. What I care about is my family, my life, I said, the words dripping with contempt. Jason can't see what you really are, but I do. You're a user, Veronica, a manipulator, and I'm done letting you think you can take what's mine. Her eyes narrowed, but the smirk didn't leave her face. You're naive if you think you can stop us, she said coldly, almost pitying me. Jason's mine now, and there's nothing you can do to change that. Something inside me snapped. I had been passive, I had been patient, but now, I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to let this woman, this stranger, tear apart the life I had worked so hard to build. You really think it's that easy? I laughed bitterly. You really think I'll just step aside and let you take everything? She paused, her smug expression faltering for a moment. I could see the tiniest crack in her armor, and it gave me the strength I needed. Let me make this clear, Veronica, I continued, my voice now unwavering. You might think you've won, but you haven't. Jason is in for a wake-up call, and when he realizes what you've been doing, I'll be long gone, and so will everything you thought you were getting from him. Veronica's face twisted with frustration. For the first time since I'd walked in, I saw something other than control in her eyes. Fear. The facade slipped, and I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. Jason will never leave me, she said, her voice trembling slightly now. He won't. I'm what he needs. You're just the past. I couldn't help but feel a small victory at the crack in her confidence, the fear, the doubt. It was all I needed to see. This wasn't over. This was far from over. I think you're wrong, I said calmly, standing up from the table, because when Jason finally wakes up and realizes you've been using him all along, he won't have a choice, and I'll be here, picking up the piece without you. I turned to leave, my steps steady and sure. Veronica's voice called out behind me, but I didn't look back. You think you can fix this? You think you can take him back? You're a fool, she spat. And when Jason chooses me, you'll be left with nothing. But her words were hollow, and I didn't flinch. I didn't have to. As I stepped outside the cafe, I felt like I had left part of myself behind in that room, part of the anger, part of the pain. But as I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs, I realized something. I had taken back control. It didn't matter what Veronica said. It didn't matter what Jason thought. I was no longer afraid. I had done what I needed to do. I drove home in silence, the weight of the conversation still heavy in my chest. But now, there was a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let Veronica win. I wasn't going to let her take everything from me, not my family, not my life. When I walked through the door, I expected the emptiness to hit me like it had before, but it didn't. This time, I felt something different. The silence in the house wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. It was a space I could rebuild. Sophie was playing in the living room, her laughter filling the air, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to smile. She was all that mattered now. My daughter, my strength. I walked over to her, kneeling down so I was at her level. She looked up at me with those bright, innocent eyes, and my heart softened. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You're so strong. She smiled, her little hands reaching up to wrap around my neck in a tight hug. I love you, Mommy, she whispered. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I had to be strong. For her. Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table again. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or the next day, or the day after that. But I did know one thing. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. I pulled out my phone, looking at the contact information for the lawyer I had reached out to earlier that week. I hadn't wanted to make this decision, didn't want to believe that it had come to this, but I couldn't let fear dictate my future anymore. I hit call and waited. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. I wasn't sure whether it was the weight of what I had done or the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But everything felt different. The house, once a place of comfort, now seemed like an empty shell. But it wasn't the house that had changed. It was me. I wasn't the same woman who had stood by, silently supporting her husband, hoping things would work out. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The call to the lawyer had been a necessary one, though it hadn't come easy. I hadn't expected to feel so overwhelmed by the decision, but when I hung up the phone, there was a strange sense of clarity. No more second-guessing, no more wondering if Jason might come back to his senses. I was done waiting. By the time the lawyer's office called me back to schedule a consultation, I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't just going to take Jason's betrayal lying down. I was going to fight for what was mine, for Sophie, and for the future I knew we both deserved. But the next day, the reality of what I was doing settled in like a heavy storm cloud. The truth was now unavoidable. It wasn't just about separating from Jason. It was about taking control of my life, taking back my autonomy, and making sure that I never let someone strip me of my worth again. Jason had been gone for 3 days now. His things were still here, his clothes in the laundry, his toothbrush by the sink. He had left without even saying goodbye, his absence a bitter reminder of everything that had been taken from me. And I knew, deep down, that I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. Not for what he had done. Not for what he was willing to throw away. The phone rang again. The lawyer's office. My heart skipped a beat as I picked up. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady despite the nerves that swirled in my stomach. "Miss Miller?" The voice on the other end was warm but professional. "This is Sarah Taylor from the law office of Barnes & Associates. We are confirming your appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Is that still a good time for you?" I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Yes, that works. I'll be there." "Great, we'll have everything ready for you. I'll make sure we have all the paperwork for you to review. We'll walk you through the process. Don't worry, you're doing the right thing." I almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. Doing the right thing. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the easy, clear path everyone said it was. But what else could I do? Jason had made his choice. I had to make mine. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "I'll see you tomorrow." The rest of the day passed in a haze of routine. Sophie and I went through the motions of our day, playing games, preparing dinner, reading stories before bed. But I felt the weight of the future pressing down on me, suffocating me. There were so many unknowns now. How would Jason react when he found out I was filing for divorce? Would he fight me for custody of Sophie? Would he try to tear us apart even more than he already had? The questions consumed me, but I pushed them aside. I couldn't afford to focus on the fear. Not now. Not when I was so close to taking control. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent, too silent, as if everything had come to a standstill. My mind raced with the endless possibilities of what might happen next. But no matter what came my way, I knew one thing: I was going to protect Sophie, no matter the cost. The following day, I drove to the lawyer's office with a quiet determination. I hadn't told Jason yet. I didn't know how to. How do you break the news to the person who promised to love you, the person you built a life with, that you're done? That you've chosen yourself, your daughter, over everything he had torn apart? But I would tell him, I would. I wasn't going to live in fear anymore. When I arrived at the office, the receptionist greeted me with a warm smile and ushered me into a small conference room. I sat at the table, my hands trembling in my lap, the cold feeling of anticipation hanging heavy in the air. I couldn't even bring myself to look at the paperwork on the table in front of me. I knew what it was: divorce papers, the end of my marriage. The lawyer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, entered the room shortly after. She sat across from me and set the papers down in front of me. "Miss Miller," she began, her voice gentle but firm, You're here to discuss your divorce and custody options, correct? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yes, I need to protect my daughter. I need to make sure Jason can't take her from me. She nodded thoughtfully. I understand. We'll help you with everything you need. First, let's go over the custody arrangements. For the next hour, we went over the legal details, the logistics of custody, alimony, and what the next steps would be. I listened intently, trying to absorb the information, but part of me was still numb. The realization that my life was about to change so drastically weighed on me, and there was no escaping it. By the time I left the office, I had the divorce papers in my hands, the first official step toward breaking free from Jason. It was real now. There was no going back. I walked out of the building, the weight of the papers in my hand, feeling like the heaviest burden I'd ever carried. But there was something else too. A quiet strength. I wasn't just taking back my life. I was taking control of my future. For Sophie. For me. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but one thing was clear. I was ready to face it. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take my power away. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and sleepless nights. I had made the decision to end my marriage, but I had no idea just how much that decision would impact every part of my life. The papers sat on the kitchen counter, mocking me with their finality. Jason still hadn't come home. He had been staying at his brother's house, too ashamed to face me, too confused to know what to say. I couldn't help but feel a bitter satisfaction that he had finally been forced to confront the consequences of his actions. But as the days passed, the anger began to settle into something more manageable. Quiet, steady, and cold. I knew what I had to do next. The lawyer had outlined the process clearly, and the custody arrangements were already in motion. I wasn't going to let Jason take Sophie from me. I wasn't going to let him walk away and pretend like nothing had happened. He had made his choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. The day came when Jason finally called. It was late afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the living room. My heart raced as I picked up the phone, but I steadied my breath. Hello? My voice was neutral, betraying none of the emotion swirling inside me. Sarah, Jason's voice cracked. I know I've screwed up, but I need to talk to you. We need to talk. I didn't answer immediately. My mind flashed to everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, the promises broken. It would be so easy to hang up, to just walk away. But I couldn't do that. Not anymore. What do you want, Jason? I asked, my tone clipped. There was a pause. I could almost hear him trying to gather his thoughts, to form the words that had eluded him for so long. I want to make this right. I want us to fix this. I want to be a family again. I was wrong. I know that now. I didn't speak right away. I couldn't. I had heard this before. I don't know if that's possible anymore, I said quietly. You can't just come back into our lives after everything you've done and expect things to go back to normal. You don't get to break my trust and expect me to rebuild it just like that. Jason sighed heavily. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, Sarah, don't do this. Don't end our marriage like this. We can fix it. We can make it work. For Sophie. That name, Sophie, stung with more force than I had expected. Jason didn't care about me anymore. He didn't care about us. He cared about how this affected his image, his comfort. Sophie was just a pawn in his attempt to manipulate me. I wasn't going to let him use her like that. I'm not doing this for Sophie, I said, my voice steady. I'm doing this for me. For her. We deserve better than this, Jason. And you're not going to come back into our lives just because you're sorry. You've lost the right to fix this. You had your chance. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought he might hang up, but then he spoke again, his voice filled with desperation. Please, I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I've made mistakes, and I know I can't take them back, but I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I'll work on myself. I'll change. I'll do better. I promise. I felt a flash of anger rise within me. It wasn't the first time he had promised me change, but the truth was, he hadn't changed. Not truly. If anything, his actions showed me that he was willing to do whatever it took to get what he wanted, whatever it took to get her. The woman who had convinced him that he could have it all, that he could have both worlds, but I wasn't playing that game anymore. "You can't fix this, Jason," I said firmly. "You can't take it back. You chose her. You chose to tear us apart for someone else, and now you have to deal with the consequences. You've hurt me more than you'll ever understand, and I won't let you do it again." I hung up the phone without waiting for his response. My hands were shaking as I put the phone down, but the anger, cold, calm, calculated, kept me grounded. This was it. I had made my choice. Jason had made his, and now it was time to move on. For me, for Sophie, for my future. That night, I sat in front of my computer, staring at the divorce papers. I could feel the weight of everything I had gone through in the last few days, the heartbreak, the anger, the uncertainty, and yet, there was a part of me that finally felt at peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just existing, I was living. I clicked the final button, submitting the paperwork, sealing my decision. The divorce was official. There was no going back now. The next day, Jason came to the house to collect his things. I had told him he could take whatever he wanted, but when he walked in, he seemed almost surprised. He looked around the living room, where everything was still the same. It was almost as if he expected me to change my mind, to welcome him back with open arms. But I didn't. I watched him silently as he packed his things, his movements slow and deliberate, almost as if he didn't want to face the reality of what was happening. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if this was someone else's life, not mine. It felt surreal to see him like this, someone I had loved, someone I had built a life with, now nothing more than a stranger, a man who had chosen to walk away from everything we had. When he finished, he stood by the door for a moment, looking at me with a mixture of regret and longing. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." I looked at him, my eyes hard, my heart resolute. "Sorry doesn't change anything, Jason. It's too late for apologies." He nodded slowly, as if he understood, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. He wanted something, more than forgiveness, more than understanding. He wanted a way out of the mess he had created. But that was the thing. I couldn't save him. I couldn't save us. He had made his choice. And now, it was over. The door clicked shut behind Jason, and I felt a strange quietness settle over the house. He was gone, for good. His absence wasn't just physical, it was something deeper. The life we had once built together had crumbled into peace, and now I was left to pick them up. But as I stood there, in the silence of an empty house, I realized something. I wasn't alone anymore. It was just me and Sophie, and I was going to be okay. The next few days felt like a blur. It wasn't the chaos of emotions that overwhelmed me, but the calm after the storm. I had expected to feel anger, devastation, or even guilt, but instead, I felt free. It wasn't freedom from the weight of what Jason had done. It was freedom from the fear of what came next. I had taken control. I had made the hardest decision of my life, and I had chosen to move forward. Sophie, bless her heart, didn't seem to understand the full scope of what was happening. She'd asked where Daddy had gone, and I had simply told her that he was going to be staying somewhere else for a while. She was too young to grasp the complexities of adult emotions and betrayal. But I saw it in her eyes. She could sense the tension was gone. And that was enough for me. She was my reason. She was my strength. No matter what the future held, I would always have her. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was finally able to sit down and assess everything. I had my lawyer working on finalizing the divorce, but there was so much more to think about. How I would manage things financially, how to adjust to being a single mother, and how to heal. The divorce papers were officially signed. The custody arrangements had been finalized, and I would have full custody of Sophie. Jason had reluctantly agreed to pay child support, though it wasn't nearly enough to make up for the emotional damage he had caused. But that wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was building a new life for Sophie and me, one that was stronger, healthier, and free from the weight of lies and betrayal. I spent the following week rearranging the house. It was small things, moving the couch slightly to the left, shifting the pictures on the walls, buying new curtains for the living room. The house felt like mine now, and every little change made it feel more like a home again, a place where Sophie and I could heal, where we could rebuild. One evening, as I sat on the floor, sorting through some old boxes of things I had tucked away, I came across an envelope. It was a letter I had written to myself years ago, before Sophie was born, before everything changed. In it, I had written about my hopes, my dreams, my fears. I smiled as I read through the letter. It was a reminder of who I had been before Jason, before the pain. I had written about wanting a family, about wanting to build something real, something meaningful. I had written about my ambition, my desire to make a difference. And though that dream had shifted, though it had been marred by betrayal, I was still that person. I was still capable of achieving what I had set out to do. I put the letter down, wiping a tear from my eye, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from something else, a deep sense of gratitude for the woman I had become, a strength I hadn't known I had until now. Days passed, and life slowly began to feel normal again. Sophie and I would spend our mornings at the park, laughing and playing together, the simple joys of motherhood, reminding me of what I had almost lost. We started going to art classes on Saturdays, painting, drawing, and doing projects that brought us closer together. I also found new ways to nourish myself, mentally and emotionally. I joined a local support group for women who had gone through similar situations, women who had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss. The stories shared in those meetings were sometimes painful, sometimes healing, but always powerful. It was a space where I could feel understood, where I could share my fears without judgment. For the first time in months, I felt like I was truly moving forward. One afternoon, while I was at the grocery store, I ran into an old friend of mine from high school, Rachel. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we had kept in touch through social media. She had recently moved back to town and was just as vibrant and warm as I remembered. She could tell something was off the moment she saw me. We exchanged pleasantries, but she didn't waste any time before asking, "How are you really doing, Sarah?" I hesitated for a moment. I hadn't expected to talk about it, but there was something about Rachel's warmth that made me want to share. "It's been tough," I admitted. "Jason and I, well, we're done. He left. I'm still figuring things out, but I'm okay. I'm getting there." She didn't say anything for a moment, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but I'm glad to see you standing strong. You look different, Sarah. There's something in your eyes, like you finally decided to take control." I smiled, a small, tired smile, but one that felt genuine. "Yeah, I think I figured some things out." We exchanged numbers before parting ways, and that evening, as I sat with Sophie eating dinner, I realized how far I had come. Just a few months ago, I had felt like my world was crumbling. I had been so consumed by my heartbreak that I couldn't see beyond the pain. But now, I could see the light again. I could see a future where I wasn't just surviving, I was living. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I would never again let anyone take my power. I would never again let anyone break me. I kissed her goodnight, holding her close for just a moment longer than usual. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Real, deep peace. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine. And I was ready. It's funny, really, how the hardest moments of your life, those dark, painful chapters, can eventually lead to the brightest, most unexpected new beginnings. As I stood in front of the window, looking out at the world, I realized just how much had changed. The past few months had been filled with hurt, betrayal, and loss. But they had also been filled with strength, with growth, and with moments of quiet resilience I hadn't known I was capable of. Jason was gone, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was living in his shadow. I wasn't defined by what we had once had or by the pain of his betrayal. I was defined by me, by my choice, my strength, and the future I was building for Sophie and Mia. The phone call I'd had with Jason before the divorce was finalized. His pleas, his apologies, seemed like a distant memory now. I didn't hold on to anger anymore. I couldn't afford to. There was too much ahead of me, too much to look forward to. My life was unfolding in ways I never thought possible, and as difficult as it was to admit, Jason's absence had created space for me to breathe, to truly live again. Sophie was growing up so quickly. Every day, I marveled at how strong, smart, and capable she was. It was as if she had been the one holding me together all along. When I looked at her, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. Every decision, every painful choice had been for her. And in return, she gave me everything I needed: love, laughter, and a reason to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. One morning, as I dropped Sophie off at school, I watched her walk into the building, her backpack bouncing with each step. She turned and waved, a bright smile on her face, and in that moment, I realized that no matter what the future held, I had already won. I had kept her safe, I had protected her from the storm, and I had built a life for her that was full of love and hope. I walked back to my car, my heart swelling with pride, and a sense of peace settled in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control. The future was mine to shape, and I was finally ready to embrace it. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work. I found a new sense of purpose, and I loved the independence that came with it. I was no longer tethered to the past, to the lies Jason had told, or to the life I had thought I would have. I was creating something for myself, a future where I could stand tall on my own without the fear that had once held me back. I also started to find new connections, meeting people who truly understood the power of resilience and growth. One of the women I met through my support group had become a good friend. She had been through her own hardships and was learning how to thrive after leaving an unhealthy relationship. We started meeting for coffee, sharing our stories, and offering each other the kind of encouragement we both needed. It felt good. It felt right. And then one evening, as I sat on the couch with Sophie, watching a movie and laughing together, something clicked inside me. I wasn't just surviving. I wasn't just healing from a past that had broken me. I was thriving. I had my life back, and it was full of possibility. I had learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. You have to be willing to face the darkness in order to step into the light. And though the journey hadn't been easy, it had led me here, to this moment where I could look at myself in the mirror and say, I'm proud of the woman I've become. A few months later, after everything had settled, I received a call from the lawyer's office. The divorce was officially finalized. The paperwork was complete. Jason's assets had been divided, and the custody agreement was in place. I was no longer tied to him in any way. It felt like the final step in the long road to healing, and while I didn't feel relief or joy, I felt peace. Jason had gone on with his life, and I had gone on with mine. And while we both carried the scars of what had happened, I was no longer defined by those scars. They were a part of me, yes, but they didn't control me. That evening, as I sat on the porch with Sophie, the sun setting in front of us, I realized something even more profound. Life, in all its chaos and beauty, had led me to this moment, a moment of peace, of freedom, and of hope. The storm had passed, and now there was only the horizon.